Hey guys, welcome to the channel. I'm trying out a new video format where I interview experts from different domains, and the idea is to explore and see if we can find some new ideas for the reef keeping hobby. In this video, I'll be interviewing Dominik. Dominik has been involved with a team who has developed a new app for measuring power using a smartphone. So I thought the idea is interesting, and make sure you watch the complete video because Dominik has offered 10 free licenses for people who want to try out the app, especially in reef keeping hobby. I hope this video inspires some of the reefers to try out this app. And if you're trying it out, do let me know in the comments below. So let's start it. Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. And in this video, I'm joined by Mr. Dominik Maglia. Uh, so I'm starting a new show called the Reef Tech Talk, and this is the first episode. And I try to invite people from the other domains to speak about some expert topics. And uh, for this episode, let's talk about the power meters and how to measure power values uh, in our reef tanks. So yeah, Dominic, welcome to the show, and uh, we can maybe start with introducing about yourself. If you can just tell us where you're from and your background.
Thank you for having me. So, in general, our company or we as Lightray, we are on a mission to put power meters into everyone's pocket. We intend to do so by using the smartphone. So instead of using an expensive physical power meter, we basically built an app that makes your phone into a power meter. We are a small team with various backgrounds in computer science, software, electrical engineering, and physics. And we've now been working on our app Photone for a little over 3 years. Or actually, the project has started way back. I believe it was 2016. But the app that now became Photone was initially released in April 2019.
Okay.
And we've been working on it ever since with increased energy, focus, and so on.
So where are you based in? Which country?
We are based in Switzerland. Our main team is in Switzerland, and we have a few freelancers that work in other countries as well, so from the US or from Taiwan, for instance. So yes, basically Switzerland. That's the short answer.
Okay. So I actually made a video around 5 months back about your application. I found through some of my research that you had developed an application to measure the power, and I was just curious and I wanted to check it out. And I had some very good results from your app, and I thought I should make a video about it. So I released the first video. It was my first YouTube video, so I went into a bit of depth about why measuring power is important for reef tanks and how we can use your app to measure the power values. That was quite interesting, and I thought I should maybe contact the developer of this app to come into my show and speak about their application. So that's how I started looking for the developer of this app, and that's how I got into contact with you. Just a small disclaimer: this is not a sponsored video. I didn't know you before. The first time I tried your app, I had bought your app. So yeah, that's out there. And so what I propose is, Dominic, if you can just speak about your knowledge about what power is, just give some basics about this value, this concept, and let's see how the conversation goes.
Yes, sure. So PAR is the short or abbreviation for photosynthetically active radiation, basically meaning light for plants. And it's used in various ways in, let's say, more into the science, in the research, and also for hobbyists or and more common applications. People that measure light or that read up on measuring light and so on usually first stumble upon lux or foot candle or also lumen. Lumen is the light or the light intensity, so the brightness of light that our human eyes perceive. So really light for humans. And PAR is the light for plants. And we could go really into detail about PAR, where it makes sense and so on. In the end, it's not, on one hand, not an exact science, so measuring PAR is exact, but understanding the biochemistry, the photosynthesis of plants is really hard to do, because you need to measure how a plant reacts to light. Doing so is really not easy. So therefore, PAR is an approximation. It's not necessarily really like an objective value that is true for every plant, but it's an approximation that's basically the best thing that science has for us right now.
Let me just cut you off, Dominic. Can you just tell me if the power values depends on the type of pigments in the plant?
No, they don't. That's the clue on PAR. So there are other values such as PER, for instance, photosynthetically usable radiation, which really depends on the plant or on the exact biochemistry of the plant. Because this can vary and also it's really hard to understand or hard to measure. PAR is, as already mentioned, a generalized approximation that considers all the light or radiation. So light is basically visible radiation. All the radiation that is relevant or has been identified as relevant for plants, which in the end is a light or radiation with wavelengths between 400 and 7 nanometers, that is then weighted equally. Whereas with lux, for instance, or lumen, you have a weighting, so where you consider different wavelengths differently, that is approximated to the human eye.
All right. So lux is a value for the human eye, and par or per is for the plants or corals and
Exactly.
photosynthetic animals or plants, right? Okay.
Exactly.
Oh, that's nice. And can you just go through what kind of instruments are usually used to measure power values in laboratories or in scientific domain?
There are basically two instruments that you're using. One is a power meter, which is basically one photodetector, so one electrical element that is able to pick up photons, that is then tuned to accurately measure the power spectrum. And the other device, which is the more expensive one, but even a power meter that I just mentioned is already expensive. But the other device is a spectral radiometer or spectrophotometer, or also called a spectrometer, that is able to measure individual wavelengths in the end, or smaller parts of the radiation or light spectrum, where you see, hey, I have so much intensity at 500 nanometers, so much intensity at 510, and so on.
Okay.
That then allows to calculate power, for instance.
Yeah. All right. Sure. So can you and what I can do is I'll speak about why this is important to the reef tanks, because I guess you had in the beginning developed the application for the plants, for growing plants indoor. Correct me if I'm wrong. And for the viewers of this channel, what we are interested is the reef aquariums, and the corals actually get around 80 to 90% of their energy from photosynthesis, because they have zooxanthellae which lives inside in symbiosis in the corals. So light is really important for us in this passion, and That's the reason why some of the serious reefers buy power meters by themselves, and it costs a lot of money, but uh, we do invest in those. And the other possibility is we can either rent it out. So that was the two possibilities till now. And around 6 months back, when I discovered that you had an application, so I was curious. I was so curious that I was ready to put an iPhone into the water, the iPhone which I bought just 2 days before that. And yeah, so what I did was I just put it in a plastic cover, the water case. You can buy it on Amazon. I had explained all this in the video. So yeah, I think it's an interesting way to look at things. Maybe we can use smartphones to measure power, and yeah, that and if the values which we measure are good enough. So let's see if you can give us some information on that. So let me come back to the importance of light in our reef aquariums, right?
Great.
Uh, right now, what we do is we measure power just in the beginning of the tank build, right? When we start a new aquarium, we buy new lights, or we get some lights, and we measure the power, and that's done. Once we have measured it, that's the only situation where we measure the power values. But um, sometimes we do measure when we buy new corals, because there are a few shops which sell corals, and they do include these values for each species of corals, because they are sensitive to some power values. There are a few corals like acropora, which are stony corals, and these corals need a lot of light, uh, maybe around upwards of 300 power, and there are a few corals which need lesser light. So that's the reason why we measure our values. So yeah, that was the thing I wanted to explain. And even for you, because I'm not I don't know if you have uh, knowledge about the corals, or it's it you were or are you more interested in the plants side, and maybe apply the same technology to the corals? So that could be interesting.
So in the end, we are, or our expertise is in light measurement, and your expertise is in reefing in the corals. So we
Yeah,
try to understand as much as possible of the biology, but in the end we try to make sure that we have a good parameter, and then
yeah,
you are the expert on knowing how to use a parameter or what to use it for in the end for your application.
yeah, yeah. I have a question for you. Does it work underwater?
Yes, it works underwater. So there aren't that many differences underwater. You just need to make sure that your phone is safe, basically, or that your device is safe. But as long as you've put it in a Ziploc bag, for instance, or just a transparent plastic bag, it works underwater. Yes.
So can you tell us if there are any technical difficulties measuring underwater compared to in-air measurements for plants? Is there any specific difficulties?
It is different and it is more difficult. Yes. In general, light behaves different in water. So how it diffracts, how it's reflected, and so on, which needs to be considered at the geometry of the power meter or when designing the geometry. That's why other manufacturers such as Apogee or Lycor and so on, they have different calibrations in the end, different calibrations for underwater power meters.
Yeah,
And the other thing is that the spectrum changes. That's not in the end not relevant for measuring power, but more relevant for understanding your light. So in water, the
okay,
more water you have between your light source and the recipient, which could be the power meter or the coral, um, the less, for instance, infrared light you're receiving. And that's also the reason
Yeah.
why if you're diving into the ocean, that it gets darker and bluer in the end, because the
Yeah.
blue light
Yeah.
is not filtered or not filtered as much as the other light, such as UV, red, greens, and so on.
Yeah, that's interesting because the I've measured the power values using Apogee sensors too, and what I've noticed is for the LED lighting systems which I use, even a depth of 10 centimeters can reduce a lot of power values. So it's really important to measure, I guess, to measure the power values, because the variation what we have in our aquariums is huge. Sometimes on the surface of the water we can have around 500 or 700 power depending on the lighting, and on the bottom of the tank we could have something around 50 to
Mm-hmm.
60. So it's a huge difference, and we need to, I guess, take into consideration that that is one of the main reasons why we need to measure power values. There are some guys, some reefers who may think that it's not really necessary to measure power values. It depends on type of corals we have,
Mm.
really. So if you want, yeah,
And what you mentioned is
it's a,
really important because your tank may look the same for our eye, so its brightness may look pretty much the same. Not you can
yeah,
see that it might be brighter at the top than at the bottom, but our eyes really are excellent at adapting to different lighting, different light intensities. And
yeah,
therefore, you really need to measure. You need to measure to identify if it's 1/10 of the brightness or if it's half of the brightness that you have on the top. Because our eyes really, we aren't able to quantify. So a light meter or a power meter, to be more specific, is really crucial, I believe, when setting up at least.
yeah. Okay, and we do have some situations where we right now we are, before in the reefing hobby we used to use metal halide lights, and we had a very less shadowing effect. But with the LEDs what we are using right now, yes, it's more economical, but we have a lot of issues with the shadowing. There is a shadowing effect. When the corals grow, they shadow themselves and they start dying off because they don't have light coming to that zone. So that's one of the reasons why I think personally that we need to measure frequently the power values, because in the shadowed areas we need to know how much power values we have so we can change the position of a few corals. So yesterday we were speaking about it just to plan out this talk, and you said that in the plants growing, I don't know what that industry is called. I'm sorry, I'm not knowledgeable in that, but you said that they do measure power values regularly. Can you just give some details about that?
Mhm. The reason being twofold, or it boils down to the plant changing. So the plant grows, which is what you want, and and then you have two effects. On one hand, the plant has different needs depending on the growth stage, and on the other hand, as the plants grow, the positioning from your grow light to the plant changes. And you constantly, or let's say constantly in terms of weekly or every few days, uh, you should measure and you should adapt. And this process is
Okay.
probably slower in an aquarium, but I still believe that it's applicable as well.
Yeah. Okay. It depends. It depends for corals. There are a few corals which grow really quick. Depends on the quality of the water and the maintenance done on the aquarium. But sometimes there are a few corals which can grow really quickly and it shadows out, and before you know it, it starts dying off.
Mhm.
So yeah. Can we speak about the accuracy of your application? Have you done any correlative studies between lab grade sensors and your sensor, your application?
Yes, we do so extensively. So we have our light laboratory where we have different grow lights, different sensors, even ranging to spectrometers that cost many thousands of dollars. And we frequently, on one hand, further develop the accuracy of our measurement algorithm, and also frequently test. And our goal is that you can have an apogee, for instance, which is a science grade $500 par meter, and you can have our app. You put them in the same spot and you measure the same. So that's what we want to achieve by really simply downloading an app and using it correctly.
Okay.
And what also must be considered that not even an apogee, for instance, is a perfect par meter. So the higher end models, they specify an accuracy of plus minus 5%, if I'm not mistaken. And there's always some variance, which is important, which is important to understand. And in our tests, for instance, if you're using our current app correctly, then you will get in the ballpark of those, let's say, 5% in air.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah.
In water, it's a bit depending on the water depth, which is where if you're taking measurements against let's say a more precise reference, so the apogee versus another reference, then you see that the deviation will become larger when you go deeper in the tank, which is just really based on geometry. It's difficult to measure underwater.
Okay.
But still, yes,
So what you're saying is the correlation between the precision of the value depends on the power values. So if at lower power values, maybe it's less sensitive than at higher power values. That's what you're saying.
No, not really. That's not an issue. So this, what you were touching on, is basically linearity of your sensor. So if you're measuring, let's say, around 1 micromole or around 1,000 micromoles, that you are getting the same proportional measurement. And that's linearity. It's not an issue. You can even use our meter to measure really, really dark lights. Basically measure the night sky, which is where our meter outperforms other par meters, just due to the physics of our measuring. It's more, in the end, it comes down to geometry, which really is different than in air. Most par meters are built for air measurements, and it's just a thing that I want to raise that you're aware of in the end, so that if you take any few par meters and put them, I don't know, a meter underwater, then you'll have different readings at 10 centimeters or such.
Okay. So in our aquariums, usually we are less than 60 centimeters. That's the standard height of an aquarium, 60. My aquarium is around 40 centimeters. That's called a shallow tank. So it can go around from anywhere from 30 centimeters to around 60, 70 centimeters. So that should be the sweet zone in your application too. So okay.
It is. Yes.
Yeah. And for your accuracy measurements, have you tested it on different kinds of telephones? Do you have any differences between different kinds of telephones used?
Yes, we sure do.
Have you noticed anything like that?
We sure do test on different phones. That's basically one of our main jobs, to make sure that it works on every phone. Yes, we did. So on iPhone or on iOS, we really have measured every iOS device that we support, and we provide factory calibrations for those. On Android, we support upwards of 20,000 devices, which is, at least for now, in no way possible to measure all of them. But still, we have a lot of devices that we use for testing. Also, some devices that we just land for maybe an hour and then test. So it's important. There will be differences based on the hardware, because our app is using the hardware. We're using the camera. But in the end, it's our job to make sure that it works. And
Okay. Do you have a list of phones you have tested on your website or somewhere? So if someone is interested to test your application, so they knows if their telephone model has been tested or not, even if it works on all phones. Do you have a list of phones that you have tested on?
It's easier than that. We don't have a list that you need to look up on our website, but we have, or rather, we have this information in our app. So if you start the app and
Okay.
you go to calibration, you'll figure out
Mhm.
if your device is calibrated by us or not. If there's a factory
Okay.
calibration.
Okay. So, all right. I'll just come back to the measurements underwater. Do you think that if we have some kind of water movement, the values could be less stable than if the water was stagnant? Because I'm asking you this because uh, we have pumps in aquariums which creates a water flow. So I guess before making the measurements, is it necessary to switch off those pumps so that we have a stagnant water and we measure it on stagnant water? Because if we have water movements, I don't know if we have an effect of the uh, the radiations. I'm not too quite sure. Do you think we need to cut off the pumps to measure values?
Honestly, I wouldn't do so, but don't rely on it, or don't entirely rely on it. So every meter is averaging about over a few measurements. So even if you have small
Okay.
fluctuations, then the average should be stable, or will be stable when you just have
Okay.
moving water. What's more
Okay.
important, or has more of an impact, is basically the movement of the water surface, which will inevitably happen if you're putting your hand in the tank or any other kind of
Okay.
telescope or something like that.
Okay.
So I would wait until the water surface is stabilized a little, but I wouldn't
Mhm.
turn off the pump.
So just for the information for my viewers, what I'm doing right now is I'm working on a new video. I'm checking the values which I get from your application, and I'm comparing those values with a Apogee sensor. I have rented it out for a week, and I'm doing that, and I'm I'll be releasing the video maybe in a week. So yeah, let's see how precise your app gives the values out in the real situation, right? In the aquariums. I know that maybe you've never tested that, so it could be interesting to know how precise of values we get from your sensor, right? Uh, that's one of the information
Looking
I
forward
wanted
to
to
it.
give you. Yeah. So, Dominic, tell me if you want to touch about any other subjects which we haven't spoken yet
Mhm.
about.
Um,
Yeah.
yes, so if we go back to your question about PAR, I think there's one common misconception that I would like to clarify, which is the difference, or let's say the interplay of PAR and PPFD. Because if you're researching plant lighting, you will come across most likely those two terms. And one is PAR, as we already mentioned, photosynthetically active radiation, which is the spectrum. But you aren't actually, let's say, quantifying PAR, because what you are quantifying, measuring, is, or putting it to a number in the end, is PPFD, which is photosynthetic photon flux density. So the flow of photons, light particles for photosynthesis. So what you're measuring in the end is PPFD. PPFD has the unit of micromoles per square meter per second, which is micromoles is the amount of photons, really the light particles per area per time. And ultimately, if you are referring to PAR measurements, PAR levels, then it's PPFD. For instance, if you're measuring a light or providing a baseline for a specific plant, specific coral, it should be PPFD or it will be PPFD. Um, and I wanted to mention it so that people don't get confused on one hand. So in the community, they are used interchangeably, or I've seen that they are used interchangeably. So probably it's meaning the same. And maybe that also as an initiative to use the correct terminology, which would be PPFD in the end. So you'll get you want to achieve a PPFD level of 300 micromoles per square meter per second.
Okay. So the values are the same, right? If you're speaking about PAR or PPFD, are the values the same, or is there a conversion between those two?
It's more that you can't say a PAR of 500 in general, or scientifically, physically correct. You can't say a PAR of 500, but usually that's meaning a PPFD level of 500 micromoles per square meter per second.
Okay.
Where there isn't a conversion, it's more, it can be used as a synonym, so to speak.
Okay. So, so in your application, I saw that it was called PPFD. I was searching for PAR and I saw that, yeah, maybe it was PPFD that needs to be selected, because you have different measurements you can make with your application, right? So exactly. The PPFD is the one which the users, if you're trying the application, it's the PPFD that you need to choose in the measurement type to have the PAR values.
Yes, exactly. So PAR is again the spectrum you're measuring, PPFD the exact quantity of light.
All right. So I guess we are coming to the end of this talk. Yesterday you mentioned me, Dominik, that you are willing to make some discounts to discount or give away of some of the license of your application to my viewers. So that's very kind of you, and that's really cool. So what Dominik has proposed as is he's giving away 10 licenses to you, reefers. So if you're interested, what we can do is you can just write a comment below in this video on YouTube, and just let me know that you're interested to check it out or test the application. And if you're willing to put your phone into inside water, and if for the first 10 requests, I'll be sending you the code to have the application for 1 year, right? That's a subscription for 1 year.
Exactly. So our premium Photone Pro for 1 year, you can also use the app completely for free. But we have some additional features and many other things that you'll be getting with our Pro subscription, where we'll happily help the reefer community out and provide those licenses.
Really nice. That's really nice and very kind of you. So if you are willing to check out the application, do let me know, and yeah, I'll send it to directly. All right, so let's end up the video here. A special thanks to you, Dominik. Thanks for coming in and giving us information about the scientific knowledge about PAR and lights to us reefing community. And there is one more thing. If you have for the viewers, if you have any questions which you need to ask to Dominik directly, you can write it into the comments, and we'll try to answer it. So thanks a lot for watching the video. Thanks a lot, Dominik, for coming in. And see you later.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot. See you. Bye-bye.